horrifying report that came in from the United States. A U.S. Navy veteran who has now been arrested by the police there for killing an Indian immigrant engineer and wounding 2 others at a crowded sports bar. Adam Purinton, who's been accused of killing Srinivas Kuchibhotla there and also wounding his co-worker at Garmin, Alok Madasani. The accused was arrested in Missouri after he told a bartender that he had shot 2 Middle Eastern men and he needed a place to hide. A third man, Grillot, was also injured there, was also shot when he tried to stop the gunman at the bar. Kuchibhotla and Madasani there, both of Indian origin, working as engineers at the GPS maker Garmin International in Olathe. The External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj has condemned this shootout. Taking to Twitter, she's written that I'm shocked at the shooting incident in Kansas in which Srinivas Kuchibhotla has been killed. My heartfelt condolences to the bereaved family.
I was just doing what anyone should have done for another human being. It's not about where he's from or his ethnicity. We're all humans. So I just felt I did what was naturally right to do. I was hitting the hand and the chest because initially I'd gotten under the table when he first started firing. Thought I heard 9 shots, expected his magazine to be empty. So I got up and proceeded to chase him down, try to subdue him so that way the police could come in and do what they needed to do. And I guess I miscounted and with everything going on, and I got behind him and he turned around and fired around at me.
You know, I might defer to the district attorney as well, since at this point we are in a charging stage to really cover the rules.
You know, as far as the motivation of this case and the facts surrounding it, you got to remember we're less than 24 hours in. There are investigators currently going out and still interviewing people. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to be sure of our facts versus speculation. So we're not prepared at this point to talk about the particular facts of the case because this is still very fresh. There's a lot of people working the street. And quite frankly, it would be unethical for me to go into a lot of details based on Kansas law to discuss those details.
Let's get in further inputs. We have with us our Foreign Affairs editor, Geeta Mohan, with further details there. One, of course, Geeta, as far as the investigations on that go, and what's the government of India maintaining on this, on how is it going to take it up with the government of the United States?
Well, there certainly is going to be an inquiry that the Indian authorities would want from the U.S. administration, but more so, Seher, the fact that there is concern, a growing concern from the Indians living in the United States of America regarding their own safety and security, the policies that are changing in the United States of America, a huge concern for Indians living there. There's a huge Indian diaspora there. The mission in D.C. is in touch with the U.S. authorities. U.S. Embassy here in India has put out a statement, a very strong condemnation of what has happened in the United States of America. And while there could be change in policies there, people cannot be taking law into their own hands. People cannot be using it to further their own white supremacist ideology, which is what we're seeing over here. While the FBI and the in a formal press conference has said that they're trying to ascertain details as to whether if this was a case of hate crime or not. Prima facie, the statement that we hear from witnesses over there, the statement from Grillot, who is the man who tried saving the 2 Indians from being hurt, is very clear that this man was out there to kill people who are not white, who are not Americans, and who particularly looked like immigrants. Srinivas lost his life. Alok has been injured. The mission and the consul general, the consul from Houston, has gone and met with the Indian community to assure them of support and any help that they want, also to make them feel more secure and safe in an environment that is absolutely vitiated. So there is a lot of confidence.
That's right. This incident, for one, at least establishes that it is an environment which is vitiated on ground in the wake of the immigration ban. Geeta, please stay on with us. Introducing our guests at this given point as well, Mr. Shivashankar Mukherjee, former diplomat with with us, as well as Mr. R.K. Mishra, fellow at Carnegie, India. First to you, Mr. Mukherjee, on the nature of condemnation that needs to come in from the government of India, are you expecting louder voices here, a louder, stronger statement that needs to be made, to be taken up directly with the President's office here?
Well, I mean, the government of India, at the level, I believe, of the foreign minister, has already expressed its concern, and it's, that I think is, we don't have to really raise the decibel level. We've made it abundantly clear that this kind of incident is not only condemnable, but that it needs to be thoroughly investigated. So that, I don't think, needs constant reiteration. It needs now follow-up from our consular officials in the U.S. On the question of what your correspondent mentioned about hate crimes, that is significant in this particular instance. I mean, racist attacks against, people of color, against Indians, against blacks is nothing new in America. It's nothing new in many countries of the world, especially in America. And of course, with the recent election of President Trump, there's no doubt there has been a kind of oxygen given to bigots and racists and people who have that kind of feeling already buried inside them. There has been, for instance, an upswing of attacks against the Jewish community. Anti-Semitism actions have been on the rise, and is a matter of concern within the United States.
That's right.
So on the question of hate crime under American law, a hate crime is described as a criminal act which has been committed on the basis of bias on race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and so on. So, and if it is classified as a hate crime, it can be prosecuted as a federal crime, not just subject to the state laws. So that makes it that makes the investigation more seriously focused. So we hope that is the course that will be pursued. But we can only see how the law takes its course.
That's right. Bringing in Mr. Mishra on this, on how much really is dependent now on how the U.S. authorities treat this case, how the law takes its course there in Kansas.
I think the loss of life is really sad and regrettable. But as you know, what happened during the Trump election, all these racial feelings, all the bigots and the racist people who had always been there, they got empowerment. And that's what we all had been fearing. And if you look at the electoral map of US and the victory of Trump, it has been actually the people who are not on the coast. Mostly coasts have been Democrats. Coastal, whether it is California and on the West Coast and other states as well as on the East Coast. So the middle America, the America which always felt, who could not participate in the economic boom of United States, always felt left out. And unfortunately, Mr. Trump, candidate Trump, gave a kind of feeling to these people that you are poor because somebody outside US has become rich at your expense. Now this is something which is very dangerous. This is something which is absolutely very difficult to get over with. Of course, this crime will be, investigated. The person has already been arrested. But I think there's also a problem there. I believe these people said, you people are from Middle East or something like that. So that Islamophobia, the problem of Middle East, the ISIS, it is so much entrenched, and this gentleman happens to be
and that has been Trump's narrative there as well, to fight ISIS,
really
to fight those coming in from certain Middle East countries there. Geeta, this also being a case of mistaken identity, very tragic scenario here, when you had the shooter say that he thinks that he shot down Middle East men and he needs place to hide when he was telling the bartender there. It's a case of mistaken identity, but at the same time, it is a case of an attack on a colored person.
Well, it is certainly not a mistaken identity to the extent, Seher, that he was not targeting an individual of sorts. It is mistaken identity given that he thought he was
Yes, given that he thought that he was targeting a Middle Eastern person there, I'm going to reconnect with my colleague, our Foreign Affairs editor, Geeta Mohan, on that in just a bit. But Mr. Mukherjee, as you stated, this was unfortunately along expected lines where you felt that the ugliness of white supremacy that would come to the fore, and that is what is playing out in the United States, where you have Indians falling victim to that as well.
Well, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't use the plural very, very generally. This is, of course, a condemnable act, but let us not forget that these racist incidents have happened in the past against Sikhs, against Indians, against Middle Easterners. It is, as I said, the fact is that the concern amongst people like people who are the other, who are not white Westerners, is higher today. And therefore, the concern we feel and the apprehension we feel is higher today because of the upsurge of racist feeling and hatred that has been generated, not just because of the Trump election. That certainly is one of the causes, but there's a wave of that going across the West, across the world. There's a lethal cocktail of the fact that the economies have not been growing well. Immigrations are targeted as the cause. There's a subtext of terrorism behind that talk of immigration and jobs. So you take that lethal cocktail and you have a wave that is of right-wing extremism almost that is sweeping across Europe and America. And one can only hope that it does not result in actual horrible acts of murder like this. But the fact is that the atmosphere is worse than it was, and it was bad enough to begin with. Racism is something that people of color face around the world all the time. So yes, I would say that this is a matter of greater concern now.
Right.
But I wouldn't point to this single incident as representing some kind of a pogrom against the Indian community. That would be going too far.
That's right. One wouldn't want to do that either. Mr. Mishra, in your view, do you think this would only further establish that we're perhaps going to look at, unfortunately, a rise in incidents of this nature in America, where we had our Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan? They also state that this does establish that the atmosphere has only been further vitiated during the Trump presidency.
I hope not, but from all the indications what we see, it looks like hopefully incident like this will make people realize that what is going on is not right. Hopefully from among the white people, people will come out and try to control such feelings, because hopefully they realize they killed people who had nothing to do with what they were trying to achieve. And I think it's only the people's feeling, and I think President Trump should come out very strongly and say, because the people are kind of taking inspiration, whether explicitly or implicitly, by what was being said, and until today, that you are poor because somebody else got rich at your expense, which is absolutely not true. So I think people, society at large, need to think whether they can, in this globalized world, can go on with this kind of racist feeling. And I think President Trump has a responsibility to come out and say something about it.
But Geeta, is that realistic? Is that a realistic expectation to have President Trump come out, condemn the attack, condemn the nature of these attacks, and say something against it? Because he's been faced with various other questions on the rise in anti-Semitic incidents and attacks and events in the United States, and he's on record taken that very personally, saying that I'm not an anti-Jewish person. Don't shoot that question at me.
Well, that's right, Seher. While President Trump, as somebody who's leading a country such as the United States of America, beacon of the free world, so-called leader of the free world, should really be talking about and should really be responding to these attacks. But we have seen in the recent past in press conferences where such attacks or such statements from various organizations and leaders that have been made have not really found the kind of response that we would have expected of President Trump. I would not be surprised if there isn't a very strong statement that really comes from him or his office. But certainly the State Department is at work over here with the person in charge of the U.S. Embassy here that works directly under the State Department has already come out with a very strong statement. So U.S. is taking it very seriously, but do not expect or hold your breath to have an explanation or an apology, or for that matter, a very strong condemnation coming in our way from POTUS.
Not directly from POTUS there, of course, but Mr. Mukherjee, would you say that you've time and again in the same breath here said that these nature of attacks are not new, have been seen in the past in the United States, particularly after 9/11? There has been a considerable rise in the nature of these attacks here. But do you think that this a recent spike in this only being driven by the ugliness of the immigration ban there imposed by POTUS?
Well, you know, it is very, very difficult to take a specific event and then point to a chain of policies which led to that specific event. What I would like to stress is that in a racially polarized society that America is, where hate crimes, racist crimes have existed all along, you know, if you remember in the Obama administration, there was this movement of Black Lives Matter, right, because there were a spate of incidents under the Democratic regime, mind you, and under a black president, right, a spate of incidents of shooting down of young black males by trigger-happy policemen, which reverberated all around the world. The point is that at this particular time, all I would like to stress is that the fact that you have in that America has elected a president who is, I mean, if you look at his entire track record from the days of Trump candidate to Trump president-elect to Trump president of the United States, he is an Islamophobe, he is a misogynist, he is, his closest advisor is a white supremacist. So naturally, with that kind of you know, feeling that has gone across this particular section of America that shares his views, one can imagine, without exaggeration, that, as I said, that this lot, whose racist feelings otherwise would be latent and perhaps subdued, right, have now got the oxygen to bring it out into the open.
To the fore. That's right. Mr. Mukherjee, appreciate that word. Mr. Mishra as well, also our Foreign Affairs Editor, Geeta Mohan. Many thanks for getting us those updates there. We'll leave it at that. We'll move on to other news here.